Hello and welcome to Lost Love Chronicles.
Today we bring a story of a man who gets cheated on by his wife, who leaves him, takes away his kids to marry a rich man. This is his tale of revenge. The day that changed my life started out as a normal day. It was not until I returned home after work that I got the bad news. My wife Karen was waiting for me at the kitchen table. "Please sit down, Rich. We need to talk." I knew right away this was going to be bad. "I'm very sorry, but I have already moved out of the house and I have filed for divorce." Karen was talking fast and not looking at me. Her words seemed rehearsed. She slid a manila envelope across the table to me. "Where are the children?" I was in shock at this point. "I moved the children out and they will be staying with me. But don't worry, you will be getting plenty of visitation. I have met someone else. You know that things have not been good between us for some time. I'm sorry, but there is just no easy way to tell you this. How could things be good between us with you out fucking someone else?" At least she had the good grace to look guilty and sad at this point. "I'm sorry about this, Rich. Really sorry. I wish things had been different. I have to do what is best for the children and me." "What is this asshole's name?" I asked, my anger growing. "I'm not going to tell you that. It would only cause trouble. So this asshole is making me a cuckold and taking my wife and children from me, but you think you are going to be able to avoid any trouble? Get a clue. If you're going to talk like that, I'm leaving," she said as she stood up and walked out the door. Her actions were a shock, but not really all that unexpected. We had not had sex for months and had not been getting along like a married couple for almost a year. I had suspected something was up and had tried to talk to Karen many times. She always told me there was no problem, that it was my imagination. Yeah, right? Karen was a beautiful woman in anybody's book. Tall and sultry with a great body. She had great taste in clothes and knew how to wear them. I should have been watching her more carefully instead of working 6 days a week to make a life for us. We played golf at the municipal course, but she preferred the country club when she went there with a friend as a guest. We had an ongoing argument about joining the club. I wanted to wait a few years, but Karen wanted the good life now. I was willing to bet her new man was a member or would be soon. I had considered having her watched by a private investigator, but never did it. Perhaps I should have. Then again, what difference would it have made? Our marriage was over the first time she gave herself to another man. The next day, I called the attorney I use for my business, and he referred me to a divorce attorney. I was able to get an appointment the next day. I told him my prime concern was my children. I wanted to know where they were and when I could see them. From my wife's attorney, we learned she and the kids were living in a house owned by a Gary Anders. He was about 10 years older than her and was one of the country club set, old money. It seems Karen had decided to trade me in for a husband with more money, a bigger house, and a country club membership. My attorney sat me down and gave me the bad news. Karen was a stay-at-home mom, and she would get the kids, half the value of our home, and probably half my business. That night was the low point in my life. I was living alone in an empty house. My children were living in another man's home, and my wife was sleeping in his bed. I had spent years working my ass off to support my family and make a better life and future for them. Now I had been tossed aside, my family gone. I heated up a frozen diner, but found that Karen had taken all the knives, forks, and spoons. I looked around and found a plastic fork and sat down to eat my meal. That plastic fork was the last straw. I swore an oath to myself right there, and then that this situation would not stand. No matter what I had to do, no matter what the cost or who I needed to kill, this would not stand. I had been operating my own equipment rental business since our marriage 8 years before. Business was really good, but I was not taking much money out of the business. Except for a moderate salary and bonus for myself, all the profits had been reinvested back in the business. I was buying new equipment as fast as I could. I had told Karen 100 times that we needed to economize a little in our private lives for a few years. Every dollar invested in new equipment would come back tenfold in equipment rentals. Karen preferred instant gratification, flying first class and getting a massage at the club. Karen was pretty good about allowing me access to the children. Cheryl, 7, and David, 5, were at my house every other weekend, and I took them out to eat usually one night a week. Not what I wanted, but my attorney pointed out it was better than most fathers got. My attorney gave me a little advice. Don't get mad, get the house. Kind of a divorce attorney's play on words. He told me she had the legal high ground, but I had the moral high ground. Playing around on me and walking out with the children and moving in with her lover was not going to go over well in our community. I needed to use that to my advantage. If I resorted to violence and vindictiveness, I would lose my moral position. He also pointed out that in this situation my wife had to feel guilty. And she was probably getting a hard time from friends, family, and our kids. These were advantages for our side. I took his advice and tried as best as I could to swallow my anger. It tasted pretty bad, but one day soon I would turn the tables on her and Loverboy. My attorney was right about the reaction of friends and neighbors. They were shocked. Karen's own family was against her. Her parents called me to ask about a reconciliation. I told them I had no part in the breakup and that it was their daughter they needed to talk to. Karen came back to the house one night to talk to me. She was actually trying to convince me that our breakup was for the best, that we could talk things out and everything would be okay. Karen, look around this house. It's an empty shell. I have no wife anymore. I have no children anymore. I don't have a life anymore. This isn't a home anymore, it's just a house. Karen, you fucked everything up so you could get rich quick with your new man. Karen was crying at this point, so I asked her to leave. The kids were a source of information as to what was going on in Karen's new and improved life. However, my best information came from friends. Typically, Karen told a girlfriend, who told her husband, who told me. I was careful to play golf with my friends on a regular basis. I didn't need to ask questions. My friends were dying to pass along what they knew. Our breakup was the hot topic for months. I found out that Karen was not the one that went looking to cheat. Anders had his eye on her for a long time and worked his way into her affections over time. Karen's attorney offered me a 60% split of our assets. My attorney knew this was a gambit for a quick settlement. Karen didn't need my money. Gary Anders had more than they could spend already. We decided to wait a little and see if we could do even better. I learned through the grapevine that Karen and Gary were planning a June wedding. The country club had already been booked. This was Gary's first wedding, so he was pulling out all the stops. He could afford to. Under normal circumstances, there was plenty of time for Karen to get a divorce and have a June wedding. But my attorney was pretty confident he could drag things out till then with a few tricks. He asked me if I needed to go to Europe soon on business. I told him I think I needed to investigate a new line of generators made in Scotland. Karen's attorney saw through the stall tactics pretty quickly and asked what it would take for a quick divorce. I wanted to say she walks away with nothing, but my attorney said that would not go over well in court. Better to give her something, or we look like we are taking advantage. We offered Karen 50% of the value of our house when it was sold, or in 10 years, whichever came first. No cash, no alimony, no child support, no part of the business, now or ever. She took the deal in a heartbeat. They must have already printed the wedding invitations. At my insistence, the language of the agreement made it plain that this was a final deal. I didn't want Karen coming back later for more money. I had stopped buying large amounts of equipment right after Karen moved out. The few things I purchased were on credit. I started putting away cash as much as I could. The divorce was final in February, in plenty of time for the wedding. As soon as I was free, I started looking for a house. I soon found a 5-bedroom house with a pool and in-law apartment over the garage. It had a large yard for the children and backed up on woods. I took a large bonus from the business and paid cash for the house. The old house I put up for rent so as not to have to pay Karen her 50% until the 10 years were up. I picked up the children at school one Friday and took them to the new house. They loved it. I called Karen and told her the new address for her to pick the kids up on Sunday. When she arrived and saw the house, she was dumbfounded. How can you afford a house like this, Rich? I always told you the business would pay off someday, Karen. Did you think I was kidding you? You should have hung in a while longer. But Rich, the mortgage must be a killer. I paid cash for the house, Karen. You should have paid more attention to the business. The rental inventory alone is valued at over $5 million. Rich, I had no idea. Really, no idea. I could see regret in her eyes. I told you often enough, Karen. Too bad you didn't listen. I joined the country club and had the pleasure of watching Karen and Gary's reaction when I ran into them at the bar. Seeing them together was hard on me, but I know it was worse for them having me around. Karen kept looking over at me. I think she was having buyer's remorse. Well, at least I hope that was what it was. One of my oldest customers was Al. He rented generators and temporary heating and air conditioning units on a regular basis. I also knew he was what people call connected. I had a very private conversation with Al about what I wanted to happen to Mr. Anders. I stressed that I wanted it to look like an accident. He told me the accident part would cost more. He could put me in touch with the right people, or he would be the middleman for a fee, about 1/3 of the total. I liked the idea of Al being my only contact and the only one that knew my identity. The extra money would be worth it. Al got back to me in about a week, telling me it would cost me 75 boxes of ZD. In other words, $75,000. I gave him the go-ahead with a reminder that it had to happen before the wedding in June. Weeks went by, and I was getting concerned as the wedding date approached. Then less than a week before the wedding, Gary Anders was found dead in a cheap motel just outside of town. It seems Anders had been making merry at his bachelor party the night before his death. There was a stripper and the usual drunken fun. Near the end of the evening, 2 sexy women appeared to take Gary under tow. The partiers took them for hookers hired to entertain the groom. They walked him out of the party and took him to a motel where, among other things, he snorted some coke. Next, he snorted some heroin, and that was the end of poor Mr. Anders. I remember Uma Thurman accidentally snorting heroin in one of my favorite movies, Pulp Fiction. Heroin looks a lot like cocaine, but snorting it is not a good idea. Too bad John Travolta was not around to save Gary. Did I feel bad about his death? Hell no. Fuck him. He robbed me of my wife and my kids. If he was alive, I would have spent the next 20 years watching him act like my children's father. I had a mental image of me sitting in the back of a church at my little girl's wedding, while that asshole walked Cheryl down the aisle. Now that was never going to happen. That $75K was the best money I ever spent. I understand they never found the hookers or figured out who hired them to entertain the groom. The good news was they determined it was not foul play. A couple of days after the funeral, I visited Gary's grave and stuck a plastic fork into the ground. I had been saving it. Karen was understandably disappointed at Gary's death. I know that's an understatement, but I just didn't give a shit about how broken up she was that her dream life turned into a nightmare. Welcome to the club. It was 3 months after the funeral that an attorney showed up at Karen's door. He was very nice about it, but the Anders family wanted to know when Karen and the children were going to move out. Karen was not in Gary's will and she was not his wife. To make matters worse, Karen had been charging wedding expenses on credit cards that were in her name. Now she had no income and no sugar daddy. Karen ran to her attorney, who dragged me back into court seeking an emergency adjustment to the divorce. The judge was not impressed with her lack of income and recommended she get a job. He pointed out Karen had been happy with the deal just a few months previously. He also noted the final deal language above Karen's signature. Gary Anders and his money was never part of that deal. Therefore, as far as the court was concerned, his death didn't change anything. One of Karen's attorneys was giving me funny looks during the proceedings. I imagined he was wondering at the funny timing of Gary Anders' death, after the divorce and before the wedding. The worst possible timing for Karen. Well, let him look, and let him wonder. My attorney pointed out that since Karen and the children would soon be homeless, the children should come and live with me. Karen's parents lived in a one-bedroom condo. Where were the children going to live? Karen had gotten sole physical custody, and now that needed to change. My attorney argued that sole physical custody should be transferred to me. I had a stable home and could afford to hire a live-in housekeeper nanny. He added that due to my ex-wife's financial situation, and in keeping with the terms of the divorce, I would not ask for any child support. Much to Karen's disappointment, the judge agreed with my attorney. Outside the courtroom, we made arrangements for the kids to be moved to my home the next day. Karen was in tears, but I was not moved. I did ask her to have lunch with me the day after to talk about the housekeeper nanny. Having Cheryl and David with me was great. My sister moved in for a few days to get them settled and do a little reconnecting. At lunch, I dropped the bomb on my ex. Karen, I would like you to take the housekeeper nanny job. Are you serious? She was not sure how to take this idea. I am very serious. The house has an in-law apartment that you can have as your own. I will pay you $400 per week plus room and board. But the best part is you will be with your children every day. This sounds too good to be true, Rich. There must be a downside to this deal. Well, Karen, there will be a couple of special rules you will have to obey. The first rule is you can't go on any dates or have any boyfriends while you live in the house. The second rule is that you will provide me with sex wherever, whenever, and however I want. Karen was stunned. You must be out of your mind. Did you actually think I would agree to be your slave girl? Not slave girl, Karen. You will not be whipped, and you don't need to call me master or any of that. You will not be harmed. Well, there might be a few spankings, but nothing too painful. Karen sat quietly for several minutes, then asked, and you will not have girlfriends? I knew right then that I had her. She was going to buy the deal. I wondered if the spanking requirement was a plus or a minus in her decision. I was looking forward to finding out. I will have any girlfriends I want. However, I will not bring them to the house or rub them in your nose. Will we be doing things as a couple, Rich? Playing golf, movies, parties, and things like that. We will not be married, Karen. Not ever. Those days are over. But if you treat me right, service with a smile, so to speak, then things will be good. Treat me right and with respect, and I will do the same to you. You will not have my last name, but we will live in the same house and share the same children. However, I will never again give you my trust. We will never be married, and I will throw you out with nothing if you ever cross me, disrespect me, or refuse me. Karen moved into the in-law apartment 2 days later. The kids were happy to have us all together again. I let Karen settle in the first night, but the second night, I told her shower and come to my room tonight at 11, please. We're something sexy. I plan to use her to my wishes tonight. Before she walked out, I never could have treated her the way I do now. Even now, I always treat her like a lady, but now, when it comes to our sex life, I just don't care. Giving her a spanking gives me pleasure. When we are with the kids or with friends, we get along like a normal people. When it is about sex, however, I love seeing her squirm. Is this normal? Is this healthy? The truth is, I don't give a shit. She made her cage, now she can lay in it. Will she cheat on me again? I don't know, but I don't care all that much. If she does, she is going to have to keep it quiet or she is out. Now the big question, do I love her? I'm not sure I know what that word means anymore. Before Karen walked out, I knew. I was living a perfect life, the American dream. But now I don't know just what I feel. When I see her taking care of a sick child, I love her. I love her on Christmas morning. But one day not long ago, I walked into the kitchen and saw her sitting at the kitchen table with some paperwork. The same table she was at when she told me she was leaving me with the children. I didn't love her that day. My life isn't perfect anymore. It never will be again. But I am no longer living in an empty house eating a frozen dinner with a plastic fork. Will I ever let her get the upper hand again? Hell no. Will she ever take my kids away from me again? Not a chance. Will I ever marry her again? Not in this lifetime. Kind of extreme, I guess, but it is what it is. Until next time.
Dear listener, if you have reached this far, please click on the subscribe button. It will be a great help.